Matt Walsh is a racist loser. I don't care that he made that movie that was meant to deny the idea that he's racist by more or less trivializing the concerns of the left. He is a racist. Many have proved this, including myself, but we're going to prove a little more of that today. He put out a video called Unhinged Comedian Admits to Stalking the Family Who Enslaved His Ancestors. When I saw that title, I couldn't quite put my thoughts into words, but I knew one thing, and that thing was that I wanted to cover this segment. I want to respond to this video, even if it's not full of arguments and it's just Matt Walsh being weird the whole time. I gotta see this. The clickbait worked on me. I'm not a Matt Walsh fan, and the clickbait worked on me. So whatever Daily Wire intern was behind the titling of that video, you got me. You got me, man. You got me. I'm part of the CTR now. I'm part of the problem. I'm sorry, guys, but I am. Clickbait. It sucked me in. All jokes aside, though, I'm really curious to see how mask-off racist Matt Walsh is going to get here. I don't know if he's going to try and distance himself from the Nick Fuentes side of the right that's getting so prominent in this right-wing civil war that's been going on lately, or if he's going to fully embrace his more racist side in this video. I don't know. I don't know what to expect. We're just going to have to watch and see. If you end up enjoying, though, make sure to leave a like, a comment, a hype, and subscribe if you want more. Without further ado, though, let's see what kind of nonsense Matt Walsh has for us here.
That's true, reparations would still be retarded, but it's not true. Like, it's definitely not true in this case. Well, the comedian Roy Wood Jr. appeared on the Shannon Sharpe.
So, was that Matt Walsh saying reparations wouldn't be retarded? Damn. We gotta find out what leads him to saying that, guys. We gotta watch the whole video.
Podcast, I guess, a couple of days ago. And he confessed to something quite bizarre. This is one of the weirder things that we've heard someone say on a podcast, and that is saying quite a lot. Listen to this.
Found the white family that purchased the first black wood of my bloodline off the slave ships in Charleston.
Yep, that's what we came off of.
If I wanted to today, I could find the white wood descendants in southern Georgia and pull up on their house. One day.
That was obvious. Like, okay, all right. I'm going to play devil's advocate to an extent here. To an extent, okay? If you're white in America and you talk about, like, your genealogy, or, like, you do the genealogy test thing, or you get the DNA test, ancestry, whatever you call it, and you find out, like, your family history, your family tree, you're probably not going to run into too much crazy stuff. There's a chance maybe you got, like, some family members that, like, fled Europe during the Holocaust, you know, that's fairly common. But for the most part, there's not, like, a crazy atrocity committed against your family, against your lineage, that you could tie back to a specific person. If you're black in America, unless your somewhat immediate family immigrated here from another country, it's very likely that your ancestors came here on a slave ship. Very likely. And if you track your ancestry back to the first descendant in America, you would be finding the guy or girl who lived their life in Africa and ended up getting kidnapped and taken across the ocean to the Americas. And you would be able to find the person, maybe even track and find out exactly who did the kidnapping. That's very possible. But also, you would be able to find out who bought your ancestor as a slave. Because, you know, people and property, basically no distinction back then, especially on the grounds of race. And so, you can track back the beginning of your lineage's oppression to one person receiving the oppression and one person doing the oppression. I guess a family of people doing the oppression. Now, I'm not saying that it is a good idea to be, like, violent or aggressive or revengeful towards the descendants of that person. They had no power over who they were born to, obviously. I think he's more making a statement of, like, I don't know what statement he's making. I want to be able to say, like, I don't think he's actually being genuine about wanting to pull up on them, right? I think it's more like, this guy fucked me over. Like, if you talk about someone, it's like, this guy fucked me over. He doesn't know. I'm his next door neighbor. I could beat the shit out of him if I wanted, but why is he always talking shit? Like, he doesn't know that. Like, obviously, that doesn't mean you plan to do it. just making a statement of like, this guy's dumb. Like, if I was a crazy person, I could like kick their ass, you know? Like, obviously it's different because he's talking about the family, the descendants of like the white family that bought his ancestor. But I don't know if this is like as crazy as he's trying to make it out to be. You know what I mean? Like, this just feels like a very matter-of-fact statement that's not meant to be taken seriously unless you want to turn it into something unhinged. You know? In this framing, it definitely comes off weird, but I'd be curious about what context this podcast is in. If, like, the whole conversation has been about, like, just stating, like, uncomfortable truths like that you can, like, track the history of your lineage to a white family still around today that, like, was the beginning of your lineage's oppression. I mean, it's a bit of a white elephant in the room.
I will.
Yeah.
They ain't got no money, though. I Zillowed they crib. They broke. Like,
okay, this is very clearly meant to be, like, joke. Okay, this is just edgy humor. It's literally just edgy humor. What do you mean? So, okay, now it's not okay to do edgy humor if you're black. You can't do edgy race humor if you're black. Got it. Okay. Okay, so the right has expanded free speech, also legalized comedy, except for when it's edgy jokes made by black people and women and trans people. Got it. Okay.
yeah. That's the thing we'll talk about with slavery, man, is that there was a lot of white people fumbled. Like, yo.
They fumbled the bag.
Yeah, you had working for you, you still couldn't come up. How you broke and you had slaves?
Yeah, that was bad, but that was gold.
They fumbled, bro.
That's very true, actually. That's actually pretty funny. Because there was someone in their lineage that fucked up pretty bad. Because, like, your bloodline can't go from, like, having been that, like, old American wealth of, like, owning a plantation and owning people, like an army of people to do all your labor for you, and then somehow, like, a few generations later, you're broke. Your family's broke. Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, how you broke and you had slaves? How you broke?
I assume he's gonna do the, like, you had slaves? How could they have had slaves? They weren't around back then. Do you mean their ancestors?
Well, I think they broke because they didn't have slaves, Roy. I think that's how.
Slavery didn't happen? Okay.
They didn't actually have slaves. Those people never had slaves. Somebody 200 years ago had slaves, but they didn't. So
generational wealth doesn't exist. I forgot about this. The right does not believe in generational wealth unless, well, when it comes to investing and putting their money into things, they believe in generational wealth. Make no mistake. But rhetorically, when it comes to messaging publicly, that's when they don't believe in generational wealth.
if you pulled up on their crib, I'm not sure what you'd be looking for. I don't know if you're going to run in there trying to free the slaves, let my people go. No more slavery. You can't have slaves. Free them.
He was just joking, Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh's whole thing is being like, hearing someone joke, hearing someone make an edgy joke, and responding deadpan sarcastic, as if what they said was a serious political statement. Like, well, actually, you see, your knock-knock joke is completely unreasonable. Because I'm actually talking like Ben Shapiro with this. I'm sorry. I can't do the Matt Walsh impression. He's very smug. He's like a different kind of smug than Ben Shapiro, and I think it's worse. I really do prefer Ben Shapiro to Matt Walsh. Ben Shapiro is just more pleasant to listen to and watch, in my opinion.
I don't know if you're going to try to...
Matt Walsh's whole thing is literally edgy humor. Ah, nay, nay. Edgy humor is okay to Matt Walsh if it's a white guy doing it, but if you're a woman, trans, or black and you're doing humor that's edgy and about, like, race or gender or anything like that, then it needs to be banned. Make comedy illegal for them.
You know, set up an underground railroad from their house to free all the slaves, but you're just going to be shouting at like a nice white family while they're eating dinner, and they're going to be totally confused staring at you because they don't have slaves, and their parents didn't, and their grandparents didn't, and their great-grandparents didn't, and their great-great-great-grandparents didn't.
You sure, Matt? how far back can you go with those greats? I think you might have gone a few many greats back. Because, I mean, how long would a generation be? Because slavery ended, quote unquote, in the mid 1800s. So, like, I think you couldn't reasonably get away with more than 4 greats. Like, 3 to 4 greats and you're in slavery times. Like, you can, like, 3 to 4 greats and you're in slavery times. Pretty much. Like, you get above 4 and you're definitely in slavery times, depending on how young generations of your family might have been had. But, like, I think he got real close to pushing too far back, because it's actually not that many greats before you get back to slavery, believe it or not. It's enough greats that the generational wealth from back then should reasonably still be around, and the setback in generational wealth from back then should still also be around, which we witness both of these things being a general case in society. Oh my god! Holy damn! Z! Thank you for the $100 super chat. Good lord, that is immensely generous. Thank you, thank you. Said, thanks for your coverage on calling out Trump as a child rapist. Americans broadly need to wake up to this, and fast. Harsh language that stands out will mean a lot in the days to come. You've got an amazing ability to read people and call things for what they are. Wow, thank you so much. That is very, very kind, what you just said there. The $100 is immensely generous, but, like, genuinely, that really touched my, that touched my soul right there. I really appreciate that. That alleviated a little bit of imposter syndrome, what you just said, and it really means a lot. I'm glad you think so, because I worry at times my harsher rhetoric might be pushing people away. I'm glad that the unashamed and unafraid nature in which I call Trump what he is, I'm glad there are people out there who see that and they're like, yes, finally someone's doing it, because that's exactly how I feel when I'm doing it. Thank you so much for the $100 Z. That is immensely kind. And thank you for the kind words as well. The words of encouragement and support, they are just as, like, motivational for me as your financial support. I really do appreciate it. You are insane for that. Thank you. Let's get back to it, though.
Actually, it's funny because this raises a point that I don't think Roy wanted to raise. You know, it's true that having slaves...
He wasn't raising any particular points so much as he was making edgy jokes, Matt.
Did not translate into generational wealth for a lot of these families. At least
for one of these families.
Not like 15 generations of wealth or whatever. That's because, for one thing, it's been a really...
You cannot go back 15 generations and be in post-slavery times, Matt. Wait, did he actually just try to say slavery was 15 generations ago? Is that what he just implied? You know he did? Yeah.
Really long time. Also, there was a civil war that was fought. But,
by who? Who actually fought that civil war? By the way, Matt. Because y'all always like to say a civil war was fought. Who fought against the slavery, Matt Walsh, and who fought for the slavery? I'm really curious. Because what I can tell you is, countless troops in the Northern Army were black. It took a lot of convincing, but eventually Abe Lincoln yielded and permitted black Americans who had been made free men to be able to enlist and serve in the Union's army against the Confederate Army. In fact, it was black soldiers in the Civil War that took some of the most severe casualties and fought some of the most bloody, brutal battles of the Civil War. I'm not saying white people from the North did not fight, but damn well, don't try to claim it was just white people fighting to end slavery, because that is not what the Civil War was. Very much for black people fighting on the Union side, it was a war about stopping slavery. Politically speaking, for the South, it was a war about preserving slavery. For white Northern Union soldiers, it was a war about stopping traitors. So let's not pretend as though the Civil War was a war we fought to end slavery, okay, Matt? Because, by the way, Matt Walsh is, like, from Tennessee, I think. So his ancestors were Confederates. Almost certainly his ancestors were Confederates, and if he was around back then, he would be too.
And the South was decimated and bankrupted. But also,
hell yeah,
slavery was not was a counterproductive system economically. If anything, slavery held the South back, and that's interesting to note because.
Well, you'd have to tell the South that. This is tenuously true. Like, on one hand, I don't want to come off as I'm defending the practicality of slavery. That's not what I'm doing here, but I'm pointing out why, even if slavery was not a efficient practice, those who practiced it nonetheless didn't want to give it up. There was a strong political, racist motivation behind it. Slave owners were obviously often very racist. Like, they enjoyed it. They enjoyed being evil. They enjoyed punishing the humans that they owned as property for trying to live like humans. They enjoyed it. A lot of them were like twisted people who had an ideological motivation to it, as that's part of it. But also, the South relies heavily on backbreaking Southern agriculture. Okay? Now, if you're from the South, you know that throughout Georgia and Alabama, you got a lot of cotton fields. Cotton's very common. But even in the areas where it's not that, a lot of the crops in the South are like waist-high bushes you have to bend over or squat to harvest from in scorching hot 100-degree plus sun in like musty, muggy, wet bulb level humidity. And it is just a nightmare. Tobacco, blueberries, cotton, like you can just go down the list, strawberries, all these things that are regularly harvested and grown in the South are just like it's free labor where you punish the people who don't work enough. Of course, these individual farm owners who had these, and sugarcane, a sugarcane processing, by the way, is probably one of the worst jobs you could have as a slave, by the way. It is horrific, because in the processing of sugarcane, you have to boil out the sugar, you have to reduce the water out of the sugar and make it molten. And so there are like horrific historical images, because yes, there were early cameras when slavery existed. So there are photos of slave auctions, but there were black men covered in like second degree burns, first degree burns, would it be? First, second degree burns, all over their body and all over their arms because they worked in sugar processing on cane plantations, where just a little splash of molten sugar means a severe burn that will never not show. It'll always be just this horrific burn on your skin. Like, anywhere on your body it lands. So a lot of the South relied on this agriculture, and it was horrible, back-breaking, body-mutilating work. And these white plantation owners were like, fuck it. Make the slaves do it. Of course they were. They didn't want to hire people. They didn't want to, they were fine using what they saw as an expendable workforce that could have kids that they could continue to own, right? And then they could have another generation of slaves. They loved that. They loved it. It was very short-sighted, and yet they still loved it. It kept their profits up, and it meant they weren't out in the fields working. And of course, in the North, they were mainly focused on industry. It was a lot of factory labor was the main thing there. And these were jobs that, for the most part, white people wanted to work. You know, they were desirable positions compared to working in the fields. And this meant that the North, considering they had, factories, they were way more productive labor-wise. They made a lot more money. They had a much bigger economy and a far more efficient economy. And so the North had no need for slavery. Automation, factory work, the assembly line would eventually come about, and that, that was Ford, but, still. That was not, slavery was not anything the North benefited from, really. And so it was less that, the North was ideologically opposed to it, and more that the North didn't need it. And the South was very ideologically in favor of it, and acted like they needed it. And so that's how we that's how we ended up with the breakdown of how things went. I forget what Matt Walsh even said that made me go down that whole stun lock, but yeah. Yeah, they had child labor instead. Little tiny hands to fit in between the gears and the machines.
It totally cuts against the claim that America was built on slavery. It was not. America was held back by.
Yes, America was held back by slavery. That's very woke of you, Matt Walsh. However, America was also built on slavery, considering more than half of America's economy at a certain point was through slave productivity. So, when the US GDP, or I guess the colony's GDP, is a significant amount contributed to by unpaid forced labor by people who are treated as property and are legally property, then yeah, that's a country built on slavery.
Slavery, if anything. And the other point, which a lot of people have made, not that this creepy outburst really
Keep in mind, the original White House was built by slaves, by the way.
calls for us to make points. Doesn't really call for a rebuttal, but whatever. So the other point people have made is the obvious one, which is, like, why don't you go back to Africa and find the family that captured your ancestors and sold them into slavery to begin with? Why aren't you mad at them? Have you
They always love to talk about this, and it is true that there were, ironically, okay, this is my understanding of the Africa side of the slave trade. In slavery era, like 1800s, 1600s Africa, there were several kingdoms that were immensely powerful, and they eventually got European support. They got guns from Europe, they got horses from Europe, they got armor from Europe, they got, like, clothing and medicine from Europe. And already having been powerful empires in Africa at the time, now they were unstoppable. And they would proceed to engage, like, the entire balance of power was just flipped, where all of a sudden the conquering kingdoms went from, like, definitely being conquering kingdoms, don't get me wrong, but there was some balance, there was a push and pull, a tug of war, and there were times of peace, to, like, certain selective individual kingdoms having the ability to wipe out and enslave and conquer thousands of people in a day, because they had guns, they had horses, they could ride up in a big, like, cavalry charge with guns and take over a whole village. And so, very much like literally every single society that is engaged in conquering in the past, when they'd conquer a village that was, like, opposing their kingdom, they would kill all the men, and every man that surrendered, that fought, and every man that surrendered, and every woman and child that surrendered, they would capture them and enslave them. And slavery was practiced throughout Africa very commonly. Like every other part of human history, when Big Kingdom A conquers Small Village B, the women and children and the submissive men get turned into slaves. But it wasn't a racial thing. And to an extent, the slavery being practiced was horrific, but it wasn't the same as the chattel slavery that was practiced in the United States, that was racially motivated, it was horrible, but it was a different kind of horrible, a different flavor, It's like picking between what's grosser, shit or vomit. It's like, well, I guess shit's grosser. But, that said, those kingdoms, having already had strong dealings with Europe, receiving guns and support from powerful European allies, then had an easy income source. Why not sell the people we've enslaved, because we conquered them and their villages, over to Europe? Sell them to the Europeans. And that's what they did. The Europeans bought up those slaves and proceeded to practice slavery independently in the countries that those slaves were sent to. The idea that those kingdoms are the ones responsible for slavery, even though through every step of the process, you then had white Europeans coming along and continuing the barbaric practice of slavery, even in some areas making it worse than it was before they got their hands in the pie. I mean, come on. You can do the whole, like, well, wouldn't it be the African slavers' fault? But why did the white Europeans choose to make the slavery even worse? Why'd they choose to... Like, why are you trying to absolve white slavers of guilt?
look them up? You could probably find them.
Probably not.
Find the family that your ancestors were captured in Africa.
I'd actually almost certainly guarantee you couldn't.
And not by any European, but by an African and sold into slavery. Have you tried to track them down? Have you
sold into slavery to who? Who bought and held the slaves that the African warlords sold, Matt? Who took them across thousands of miles of ocean and then proceeded to generationally enslave their family and lineage for, in many cases, hundreds of years before the Civil War? What's wrong with Matt Walsh's eye? Hopefully he's got Bell's palsy or something. That'd be really funny.
Look them up on Zillow. I mean, that probably won't work. They probably don't live in the kind of home you can find on Zillow, but why don't you focus your attention on them?
Oh my God, he definitely does have some kind of lazy eye thing going on right now. I didn't notice. Yeah, there is something up here. What is going on? Does he have Bell's palsy? You wouldn't be able to tell all that much because he's got a beard, but like the whole side of his face could be low-key paralyzed. I am noticing that like this eyebrow is a lot less animated than this eyebrow, and this side of his face is like curling upward more than this side, which definitely reminds me of Bell's palsy. Stroke? No, it wouldn't be a stroke. Someone Matt Walsh's age shouldn't be having strokes, especially not someone of Matt Walsh's build and health. Shouldn't be having strokes, but a very common similar stroke symptom is, or similar to strokes syndrome, is Bell's palsy syndrome. We don't know what causes it, but it just happens sometimes, where one day you wake up and half your face is paralyzed, and it can last for a year. I have a friend who got Bell's palsy a couple years ago, and he's only just recently started to look like you wouldn't be able to notice he had Bell's palsy. But like it's not something you're born with, it just happens one day. You just wake up and half your face is paralyzed. Most people will never get it. Vast majority of people will never get it.
Go hold them to account for something that their distant relatives did 200 years ago.
Nah, I think he's got Bell's palsy. Oh, let me Google it. Well, nothing comes up when I look it up, but for those who don't know, risk of malignancy following emergency department Bell's palsy diagnosis in children. Well, that's a study related to, like, it happening in kids and whether or not it could lead to more serious things. But yeah, it's basically, it's a palsy. It's a paralysis of the face. Palsy is a medical term for paralysis.
And it's also funny because, I've gotten in trouble for saying this, but when you think about a guy like Roy Wood, well, you've never thought about Roy Wood, but now that you are for this brief moment in time, and you think about him feeling angry at the family that bought his ancestors.
Well, no, he was making edgy jokes. Make comedy legal again, yeah!
Or brought them here as slaves. It's like feeling angry at
Legalize
them.
Comedy! Yeah!
Well, it doesn't really make sense. And this is one point about reparations that is rarely brought up. And sometimes it is, but it's rarely brought up. And it's a point that can be easy to misconstrue and take out.
The reparations thing was a literal joke as well, man. Come on. Come on, bro. Also, the reparations thing, like, the only reason that's even a conversation anybody has anymore is because the right talks about it. Like, I've never hear anyone on the left call for reparations. I've not heard that. And I shit you not, I have not heard anyone on the left call for reparations since I was in literally middle school. I'm not joking. I was in middle school the last time I heard a lefty call for reparations. It's been a long fucking time.
The context, so whatever, that's fine. But the point is this, that reparations assumes that there is something to be repaired, that your life is worse now than it would have been had this thing not happened. Now, again, even if that's...
Is Matt Walsh about to do the slavery was good for black people argument? I think that's what he's about to do.
True, reparations would still be retarded, but it's not true. Like, it's definitely not true in this case. Roy Wood, if his ancestors weren't brought here, I mean, he's still He's still mad. He almost gets emotional when he's talking about it, or at least is pretending to. A little bit of acting there. But as he's talking about it, you can see it's like seething anger he has. He's so angry about it that his ancestors were enslaved 200 years ago. 2 centuries later, he's still so angry about it that he's obsessing over it.
One of my favorite things about racist white people like Matt Walsh, he will do everything in his power to create the largest gulf of separation possible between him and like, or I guess white people today, and those who have white slave owning ancestors, I should say, and their white slave owning ancestors. He will do everything in his power to create a gulf of history between these two groups, right? But when it comes to talks of immigration and whether or not we should be allowing brown people into America, nowadays, you know what they love to say? White people built America. White people created our culture. America is a white country. Our ancestors built this. We created society. We created technology. We created infrastructure. We created... Like, anytime it's time to take credit for what white people have created, the good things, it's we. We created this. We did that. We undid this horrible thing. We created this revolutionary great thing. But whenever it's talking about the bad shit white people did, then it's like, whoa! What are you talking about? That was generations ago. You can't conflate white people today and the white people of the 1800s and the 17 and 1600s. No. Hey, relax, guy. No. You know, like, they go full down that route, you know? Meanwhile, as I said, anytime it's about taking credit for something that their white ancestors did, or not even their white ancestors, just white people of a long time ago did, and it's we. I think that's a little funny.
But then you have to ask, well, what are you angry about now? Do you wish that it, I mean, if your ancestors were not brought here, you would be living in Africa right now. So you are in a better place now, much better.
Does Matt Walsh think the majority of black people in America ended up being successful comedians or podcast hosts or whatever because they're in America? I think he damn well knows that is not where most black people in America ended up. Now, I'm not arguing that, like, life in Africa, for the most part, is all that great. A lot of Africa is still developing countries. But also, he is aware that there are a lot of people in America who immigrated from Africa and are very wealthy, right? Like, there are several very wealthy African countries, and we get a lot of wealthy immigration and tourism from those countries. Like, we can act as though every single black American, if their lineage hadn't been forced to come to America through slavery, they'd be worse off had their lineage stayed in Africa. But do you really know that? Hell, if the practice of European slave trade had died off way sooner, and those African warlords enslaving and selling entire families off across the seas, if that had grinded to a halt centuries sooner, how do you know that Africa as a continent would not be in a very different place today? I have a feeling it would be. Isn't one of the famous stereotypes rich Nigerians? Well, yeah, of course. There are lots of parts of Africa that are very wealthy still. But remember, you know, Matt Walsh's average viewer, like, when they think Africa, they think like Ethiopia or like the coast of Somalia.
Than you would have been had the bad thing not happened. Actually, you probably wouldn't exist at all. If your bloodline had stayed in Africa for these past 200 years, it's a very high chance that it would have been wiped out by tribal warfare, disease. So you know, if that...
You owe your life to slavery is what he's saying. Matt Walsh is doing everything he can right now to say slavery is good. And this is the guy who made the movie about how the left calls anyone who disagrees with them racist.
If that hadn't happened, this thing that you're still mad about somehow that didn't happen to you, but if it hadn't happened, then either you'd be living in Africa now or you would not exist.
Did you know that if your parents had not fucked on the night that they fucked, you wouldn't exist either? So? Okay? Like, slavery was still bad. You can still be mad about a crazy injustice that happened, even if, technically, if it had never happened, you would have never been born. Okay?
So there's something just incoherent about being angry at something that happened centuries ago and something that, without it happening, you would not exist. Or if you did
So are you arguing slavery is good, Matt Walsh? Is that what you're arguing, buddy?
exist, you would exist in a much worse condition than you currently do. Now, does that make slavery good? Is that a justification?
He's lampshading it
Obviously
now.
not.
He's lampshading it, okay.
And if you take what I'm saying that way, then you're just a stupid or dishonest person. And
I must just be stupid or dishonest for predicting exactly where he was going with that line of logic and then predicting he was going to lampshade it and say, oh, and if you take what I just said from what I just said, then you're stupid. I love how he had to specify, I'm not saying slavery was good, even though all my arguments suggest slavery is good. And if you think that's what I said, if you call me out, you're stupid and you're dishonest. Like, okay.
that's your problem. All I'm saying is the fact that it's just a fact. I mean, you can't dispute it. Roy Wood is almost certainly in a better position today now than he would have been had his ancestors not been brought here by slaves. That's the kind of thing that people could get mad at you saying, but they can't dispute it. They can, well, how dare you say that? Yeah, but
Well, how do you even know that? I'll dispute it by saying, how do you know? How do you know what path his family would have gone? How do you know his family wouldn't have ended up being one of those, like, rich motherfuckers who immigrates to America? He might have still ended up in America, just as an immigrant, who immigrated here, like, a couple generations ago, or a generation ago, or came here as a first-generation immigrant, wealthy. Maybe a business owner, you never know.
am I wrong? Well, no, but still, how dare you say it? There's a lot of that. And so but this is
Well, I'm not saying how dare you say that. I'm just saying you're stupid, wrong, and racist, Matt Walsh. Calling what you say what it is not me trying to, like, magically make what you said not have been said. Keep saying the dumb shit you're saying, and I'll keep making fun of it. Like, you're clearly never going to become a better person, so yeah, I'll just make fun of you every time you say something racist. Happily so.
this is a freeing thing, right? Roy, I mean, free yourself. You are free. Your parents were free, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. So, you know.
How much further can you go back? Because great-grandparents, you're already getting into Jim Crow territory, Matt. You're getting into the Jim Crow law territory there. You go back 2 more greats. 3 at the most, and you're back in slavery, man. Come on. It's not that long ago. Don't pretend. There's a reason why you keep having to stop after 3 or 4.
You've been free your whole life. Your family's been free for a very long time. Legally, legally free, physically free, you can go do what you want. But your mind is still trapped, right? Your mind is enslaved. You've enslaved your own mind through resentment.
Don't steal civil rights activist language there. I know he's fucking ripping off, what is the, it's Bob Marley, right? Who said, free yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. A song about apartheid. Like, come on, don't fucking rip that shit off, bro. You're literally ripping off a song. You stole that from lyrics, dude. I know where... Bros stole that from a song about the evils of apartheid. Y'all know that, right? You know what song I'm talking about? Redemption song? Y'all know? You have to, right? Am I being a boomer right now? I guess, I don't know if any of you guys would listen to Bob Marley. Yeah, he stole that line from a woke-ass song about the evils of apartheid. Google it. It's called Redemption Song.
Resentment, misplaced rage, anger, blame, whatever it is you're upset about in your own life, you're blaming this random family in the suburbs. right? You even admit they don't have any money, like they've got problems of their own. You're living better than they are. And you're just, you're enslaved by it. So free yourself. And this is one of the ways, is to realize that, yeah, well, this thing was bad, but A, it didn't happen to me, and B, I'm in a better spot today because of it. So, well, like, what is there to be angry?
He is doing everything right now to say slavery is good. Like, he won't say slavery was a good thing, but he will say you have no reason to be upset that slavery happened. You should not see slavery as an evil, is what he's suggesting.
Angry about at this point? What is there for me to be angry about? There's a lot for my ancestors who died a long time ago to be angry about, but they're not here anymore. They're dead. What is there for me personally to be angry about? Well, not much.
That was an odd last line.
Hey, you.
Interesting. I'm curious what the comments on this are like. You were never a slave. I was never a slave owner. I owe you nothing. White people did not invent slavery, but we did end it. White people ended slavery? I didn't know there was no more slavery today in the world. That's crazy. By the same logic, if someone in his family committed a heinous act, he ought to be punished. I don't think he said that. Black fatigue is real. I don't have the foggiest idea how he was going to track down the tribe that trapped him and sold him to another tribe, who sold him to a coastal trader, who sold him to a boat owner's captain, who sold him to a buyer. He wants money from a couple centuries later. Good luck. I'm not going after the descendants of the English that killed my Scottish ancestors. Neither is he. We're broke, but we had slaves. Well, you're broke and you was kangs, so... DNA test. I'll bet he owes himself money. He could go back even further to the black people in Africa who sold his ancestors for some beads, a hairbrush, and a piece of broken mirror. Turns out he got a great deal. Why should I pay money for something in which I never participated to people who never experienced it? It's always noteworthy to see people like this only start the clock of history at around 1600 AD, which conveniently excludes the many thousands of generations of their own ancestors who took turns with the mantle of oppressor. Really? History only starts at 1600 AD for black people? I didn't realize that no black person was willing to acknowledge that. Okay. Is he going to track down and stalk the family of the people in Africa that sold his ancestors to the white men? It's wild how many of these comments are just restating the same argument that Matt Walsh makes in the video. Jesus. What a bunch of dumbasses. Anyway, folks, if you enjoyed this video, if you found it fun, entertaining, educational, leave a like, a comment, a hype, and subscribe if you want to see more from me. It really does help. I appreciate it a ton. And as always, I hope you have a good one.